friends. Welcome to Flosstube and Variety Show number 117. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. And I'm Emily Williams in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And it's evening. I'm recording on a Thursday instead of a Friday because I've had a very busy week. And I got an offer of something to do tomorrow that I didn't want to pass up, and I realized that it would be very difficult to find time to record a video tomorrow if I waited. So I decided I'll just seize the moment and do it tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And if any of you are new viewers, of course, you're so welcome, and I hope you'll find something, I don't know, interesting, fun, something that will bring you back. This is an example of what's now fairly uncommon, that I record not on a Friday, but it might be worth your while to subscribe and click the little notification icon so that you won't miss a video if I happen to record it out of the normal time frame on Friday. I am going to try to upload this tonight, Thursday night, instead of holding on to it until Friday, just because I'm here. I have time to make sure it happens smoothly. So anyway, Flosstube means cross stitch and variety show means other things. So we'll find out what variety show we have, excuse me, a little later. Cross stitch. Under the roof of blue Ionian weather. Now I have not actually, I've only put in about 400 stitches on this since last Friday. I didn't stitch on it at all, at least 2 of the days. But because it's kind of dramatic, the change, I mean, in a small 400 stitch way, I thought I would show it to you. And so if you've been watching as this has been taking shape, you'll see that this water, this sea in the Mediterranean there, right under my chin right there, is new. Thanks to extending my gridding out to the edge of the picture, I'm moving out that way. And I kind of wish that I had extended the gridding up and down farther than I have. I'm not sure what I'll do about that. But for now, at least I can do some extra. I mean, I'm going to have to extend the gridding. But here is where we are so far. Under the Roof of Blue Ionian Weather by Golden Kite. A lot of blends and a couple of changes that I've made recently that have made it more likely that I work on it. Well, one is I finished Jane Boyer because I had purposefully set this aside until I was sure I was going to finish that in the time frame I wanted to. But one difference is that I am using just a regular plastic hoop now instead of, what am I doing? Instead of that wooden nurge hoop, which I really like that wooden nurge hoop, but it requires a screwdriver to tighten and loosen, and that meant that it was just too much trouble to move the hoop, and sometimes what I wanted to stitch or what was the next logical thing to stitch required moving the hoop, and it just made me say, I'll do that some other day. So changing to the plastic hoop is one thing, and another thing is doing the 1 or 2 threads per day plan is helping me keep going on that. Let me put this down here. It's Thursday. I have no idea how to do a video. It's not Friday. I've worked some on Jane Thompson, 1838 by the Scarlet House. This was an exclusive through the Homespun Needlework Facebook group, and it was in cooperation with Shepherd's Needle in Arkansas, which I visited while we were on our trip to the eclipse. So what did I do since? Well, I did the first line of the verse, Jesus, permit thy gracious name to stand. I did the heart. I did at least one or two of the flowers on the outer border, and maybe the flowers on the inner border are new this time. So what goes over here to the right of the verse is a tree, which I'm going to wait until I finish the verse, I think, to do that. Nothing is over 2, and I mean, everything is over 2 in this. This is 36 count Sleeping Bear, and I'm using NPI silks, which was one of the options when we ordered this. And I like NPI silks, it turns out, and I like Sleeping Bear. I forgot to pull out the cover pattern, cover picture of this. It doesn't matter because you can tell what it's going to be. This is sampler 193 by 2x2 Stitch Art, which is a Ukrainian designer. And I am working over here. And you probably can't, well, you might be able to just see on the camera that there's a shadow of red there. So I was stitching along, watching a video, not a Flosstube. I'm sure it was a Cracking the Cryptic Sudoku video where I went astray. I was off by a stitch somewhere in this area, and so I just frogged a bunch. About maybe 200 stitches I took out, and I'm in the process of putting them back to make it right, because this is so symmetrical and things depend upon one another so minutely. It has to be right. This is 16 count white Aida and DMC 777, 2 strands over 1 Aida square. And that, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna make a pillow. Now last weekend was the 3rd weekend of May. Yes, which is Nativity Sal weekend. Hashtag Nativity Sal. Leslie and I and Teresa and hopefully some of the rest of you are using the 3rd weekend of each month to work on Christmas themed projects. And by so doing, it's possible to make good progress throughout the year. This is called Bethlehem by Diane Arthurs. Arthurs, yes. And I am doing this on 32 count Lugana dyed by Fox and Rabbit. And I got this piece because I'm a member of their Patreon. And the Patreon members were offered the chance to buy fabric that was left over from a Mirabilia retreat that they held in Australia. And so I bought this, and I bought another blue piece of 32 count even weave. This is dreamy to stitch on. Now, because of the dyeing and maybe because of how Lugana is, the holes are small. They're easy to see. You just have to have a good blunt, a truly blunt needle to get through them without piercing the thread. But, and I'm using DMC 3788, something like that. It's a gray color. I should know because I had to buy another skein of it, which was a little scary because what I started with was what I thought was most of a skein of thread that I bought in the 1980s, probably, maybe 90s, but not recently. And there have been some changes in the dyeing, in the dye formulas for some of their grays because of rules in, I think, Europe somewhere, maybe in France, in fact. So there's a slight difference in color, but I think it will not matter. And as I'm coming along on this, I've passed the halfway point. So here's we've just had that. This is where we're coming from. This is the beginning, as you know, because you can see it left to right. It's backwards to me. So we're coming along, this is another hillside, there's a building here, and then comes, oh, there's actually a sheep there also. I'm right about here. So there's this building that will be there, and then this is the beginning of a sheep, which is this sheep. And once we get to the manger scene itself, I might switch to the new color if I think I'm truly going to run out of the old. And then it won't, I think it won't matter that much if it's ever so slightly different. So, and I think I mentioned that before last weekend, or maybe I mentioned in my video that I was going to have to, last weekend, chart the rest of it, and I did that. I did chart it. Took some time, but it makes it so much easier to stitch when I'm using Pattern Keeper. The paper chart is hard to read. So is that all I have to show you? Oh my. I didn't get it out. Pause, please. Camera's shaking a little bit. I'm back. I forgot to get this out. Hannah Campbell, By Hands Across the Sea. I spent only one evening on this, I think. I think that's right. So I don't know if you're going to feel like this is, well, I think it's pretty good progress. Let me get the needle minder out of the way. So what I did was I finished the small scale alphabet in the middle of that cartouche, and I did the numbers below it. And I did the letter M down here on this side, and I started this tree that's beneath that bird on this side. And I'm sorry about the fold that's making it hard to see. Maybe I can tauten it, which is different from teaching it. So Hannah did a very nice job with this sampler. Now, it's not perfect. There are places where she clearly had decided what she was going to put in before she figured out that she wouldn't have room for it. So for instance, the alphabet, that small alphabet doesn't have a Z. The digits end at 8. Things like that. The large alphabet, this large over 1 beautiful alphabet in the center, stops at U, I think. And those are not because of any tradition to not include the other letters. It was purely she ran out of space. And her interest in this sampler is clearly the design and layout of it, this is not evidence of her knowledge of the alphabet or ability to mark linen. This is a thing of beauty. And it certainly is. But in this alphabet, the small alphabet, I made some counting errors, spacing errors, and I could have fixed it. I mean, pulling out over 1 is not straightforward. It is, I'm using 103 silks for the over 1 portion and soie d'orge for the rest of it on 36 count ballet slippers by Fox and Rabbit. 1 over 2, except for the over 1, which is 1 over 1. So it's not easy to do it, and you certainly can't do it by clipping threads with your scissors because it's almost guaranteed that you will clip a linen thread if you try to clip a teeny cross stitch over 1 intersection. So that's one reason I decided not to fix it. And the other reason is because Hannah made mistakes and I'm making different mistakes, but it's going to be beautiful anyway, and I'm not worried about it. I mean, I'm making her mistakes too, and I'm adding some, so I'm not worried about that at all. It's fine. So, variety show. first of all, thank you so much. So many of you shared either stories or recipes with me for all the eggs that I talked about last week. I still have 1,001 baker's dozen of eggs. So we've eaten more than a dozen eggs since last week. That's kind of remarkable. But partly we made a batch of brownies, and I had scrambled eggs a couple times, and that kind of thing. I think we did make, egg salad sandwich one day. So anyway, we've been using the eggs. And somebody mentioned French toast. That was an idea I had not thought of, but that is a wonderful idea. So perhaps there'll be some French toast in my future. Anyway, thank you. Still have a dozen eggs, and the friend still has 32 chickens, so I may have more eggs at some point. But what I wanted to talk about today is books that, specifically a category of books that feature a primary character that has social skills that are not the norm. Let's put it that way. And the reason this came to mind is because we're reading this book, The Maid, by Nita Prose, in book club right now. And I've started it and reading the actual book, which is not my usual. I usually get it on the Kindle or as an Audible book. And I'll say the funny thing is I go along reading and, the light is not really bright, and I think, gosh, I just want to make this bigger. So I'm doing this motion with my fingers the way I would on my iPad to make the print bigger. And it doesn't work. It does not work. But so far I'm managing, and I'm thinking I'm going to try to read it this weekend, maybe. We'll see how far I get, because someone else in the book club wants to borrow that copy. So anyway, we're reading that book. And the main character, the maid, Molly, is her name, Molly, the maid, seems to be autistic, I would say. I think the currently popular term is on the spectrum, by which is meant on the spectrum of neurodivergence, with neurotypical being people who are at the end of the spectrum where there is no discernible difference between them and anybody else. We used to say normal, now we say neurotypical. And the other end of the spectrum is degrees of severity of autism. So the maid, I've only read 3 or 4 chapters, and I would say that Molly, the maid, is on the spectrum. I'll just use that expression. It's the currently popular one. And that reminded me that in our book club, we also read the book called The Rosie Project by Graeme, Simsion, I think is his last name. And his first name is spelled Graeme. It's set in Australia. I believe he's Australian. And his main character, whose name I can't remember, is a man, a professor. And he is on the spectrum. And another book that we read is called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And that's about a 15-year-old boy named Chris, who lives in England, in London, I believe, or somewhere over there in the UK. And he goes to a special school. And as you get to know him, it's first person, it's told from his point of view. As you get to know him, you begin to realize that he's on the spectrum. And that book is by Mark Haddon. And then there have been other books that we've read in book club which have a main character who has unusual interactions with the world and with people. Another one that's on my list here, a man called Uva, this was made into a movie recently, A Man Called Otto. I guess we Americans can't say Uva or something, but a man called Otto. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is another one by Gail Honeyman. Drive the Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. Can't think of that author's name, but it's a Nobel Prize winner. And there's another unusual social interactive person as the narrator. And it's sort of interesting to read these books, and particularly to read these books when I have a family member who is on the spectrum. And I think that we really enjoyed, I think my husband read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and we certainly we did see the stage version of it. I don't know if there's a movie, but the interesting thing is to see how these people are depicted in these books, because I think that the reason that they appear in these books is because they're not, many of us might not have known somebody like this. And so let's take the positive slant. It's a way to help us get to know a type of person that we might not have met before. And another reason, though, is because the quirks of these people's personalities are sometimes very funny. Now, I haven't gotten far enough into The Maid to see whether she's being depicted with any type of humor about her personality or not. But definitely the opening scenes of Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine was designed to make us laugh. And in a way, that whole book was kind of out there. There was a lot of things going on in that book that, don't know. But our book club really did like the Man Called Ove. We did like that. And the Rosie Project was pretty funny throughout. And yes, it was because of his particular personality, but it was also well written. And I think that the best of these types of books, and I haven't listed all of them that exist, I've listed the top 5 that came straight to mind. The best ones create a sympathetic understanding of these people. Now, it occurs to me, Rain Man is a very famous movie that features Dustin Hoffman, right, as Rain Man. And there are a couple of other movies that sort of thrive on this person who's a little bit of a social misfit. And by misfit, I mean doesn't fit, as one would expect. Not misfit as in, stupid or ignorant or anything like that. Just somebody who doesn't fit. So as I read these books, of course, I find the funny parts funny and I find the interesting parts interesting. I think I'm a very typical reader. I'm not a critical reader. I certainly don't have a standard that I'm trying to, either a standard in the terms of a flag that I'm trying to wave and get everybody's consciousness raised about people who are on the spectrum, nor do I have a standard by which I gauge the truthfulness of how people who are on the spectrum are depicted in these books. And part of this is because everyone who is on the spectrum is different from each other, just like all of us who are not on the spectrum are different from each other. In fact, every person in the world who's ever been is different from each other. That's just how it is. And you cannot meet somebody and say, oh, they are just like somebody else, because they may be similar to that other person, but they're not just like that other person. So anyway, that's just sort of it's an intriguing category of book, and one that by and large I have enjoyed reading. Now, I will confess, as I say, I'm only about this far into The Maid, and I'm about that same distance into the Bones of the Dead book that I mentioned, which I'll put the actual title in the description field. So I can't say whether I think that those authors have depicted their non-neurotypical characters in a kind way or in a sympathetic way. But by and large, we expect the main character of a book to be somehow sympathetic, or otherwise we would hate the book. An example of this is the book Olive Kitteridge. And again, I'll put the title down here. So I think she was neurotypical, but she was just nasty. And we read it in book club, and some of us just did not like the book because we did not like the person. And it's sort of funny how books like that get any readers, because why would you read a book about somebody who's nasty? And I don't remember it being a redeeming, there being a particular redemption element to that story, to that character as the character was developed. I don't know. Anyway, so that's a little topic of books. I wonder if you've read other books that are about characters who are not neurotypical, who are on the spectrum. Oftentimes, I will say that whether you like the book or not, it makes a fantastic discussion. Sometimes because we know people who are like this, and sometimes because we get a picture of how people who are different from us are. Or maybe we know a family that has an autistic person in the family, and we can have a little more empathy for what it is like to live in that family, to have that circumstance in your daily life with somebody that you love. So anyway, that's a topic that I was thinking about because we're reading The Maid. Whoops, crash. The Maid. We'll be discussing that at our June book club meeting. And I'll just add one little advertisement for book clubs. If you enjoy reading novels, or probably any books, it would be worth trying to find a book club. And if you can't find one, form one. Our book club, the one that I have mentioned a few times, a friend of mine and I formed it, and the very first meeting of the book club was just her and me, and we discussed A Girl with a Pearl Earring. I can't remember the author, but it's about Vermeer, the painter. And the main character is the maid who is pictured in the painting, The Girl with a Pearl Earring. The second meeting of the book club, we had 4 people. We each invited a friend, and the book we read was, I believe, The Red Tent, which is a very interesting book about Dinah, the sister of Joseph, and it's a biblical story and kind of a shocking one. But it's told from the point of view, I don't know if it's told from the point of view of Dinah or her maid. I can't remember, but it was a very interesting book. And we've read a lot of other books, but you don't have to like the book of your book club, but it should be something that's interesting to discuss, that brings up points of view that you might not have thought of, that your fellow reader, your fellow book club member will have had a reaction to something that you didn't think of. Those are always the best discussions. So anyway, this is Thursday night. Hope this won't take any of you by too much of a surprise. I will be making a video next week, I believe. Yes. There is a Friday coming up that I will be out of town, and that particular week I won't be making a video, and I won't be making a huge effort to do a lot of cross stitch on that particular trip either, I don't think. I mean, I'll take some with me, obviously, but I'll be flying, so And I'll tell you more about that trip when it gets closer. But tomorrow, instead of making a video in my normal way of doing it, I'm going with some friends to a casino, which I think I've probably told you about my casino experiences at some other point. And maybe next week I'll have something fun to tell you about this casino experience. I hope you have a nice Memorial Day weekend. Many communities have parades and decorate the graves of not of veterans, because veterans are alive, the graves of military, people who served in the military who have died. Certainly the hometown that I grew up in had, I think, a parade, and definitely put flags on the graves of military in the local cemeteries. And possibly there was a big picnic some years in the park. Activities like that. Small towns tend to have more of that sort of thing than cities do. I believe there's some kind of a parade in Chapel Hill even. I might be making that up. But I'm going to be having a sewing day with Cindy. In fact, it will be the beginning of Zipper Week, and we will make a video, if not this weekend, then sometime during Zipper Week, and show you what we're working on. So, what else? I don't know. I think I've talked long enough. Thanks so much for watching. As I say, I hope you found something interesting, and if you want to not be taken by surprise by when I post a video, if it's out of sync, out of normal time, you should subscribe. Many blessings to you, friends.